The alarm didn't come from Earth. It came from the dark. 347 light-years from the nearest human colony, deep inside a region of space that had no name on any human map, something enormous was moving. Something patient. Something that had been watching for a very, very long time. The alien command ship was the size of a small moon. Its hull was black, not painted black, but made of darkness, absorbing every trace of light that dared touch its surface. Inside, the corridors hummed with energy. Tall figures moved through the ship. Their eyes glowed faint amber. Their skin was pale as bone. They did not hurry. They never hurried. They had never needed to. In the central war chamber, a meeting was already in progress. A circular table floated in the middle of the room. Above it, a slow-spinning hologram of Earth rotated in silence, blue, green, wrapped in thin clouds, fragile-looking, almost beautiful if you didn't know what was coming for it. But a voice broke the silence. "Sector 7 is clear," said a tall figure on the left. His name was Vorin. He was an admiral of the Keth Empire, a civilization so old it had watched other species rise and fall the way humans watch seasons change. The outer monitoring array detected no new activity. The humans remained unaware. Another figure stepped closer to the hologram. His fingers, long, 4 of them on each hand, moved through the image like smoke. "They are still fighting each other," he said. "Not with contempt, just with fact. 3 active military conflicts in the northern hemisphere. Resource disputes in the southern regions. Political fractures on every continent. They are predictable." A third voice came from the far side of the chamber. This one belonged to a female officer, Commander Zara, the tactical mind of the entire Keth fleet. She rarely spoke. When she did, everyone listened. "The planet is ready," she said calmly. "The population is distracted. The military is fragmented. There is no coordinated defense. We should begin the first phase within 48 of their planetary rotations." Vorin nodded. The others nodded. Nobody laughed. The Keth did not laugh. But there was something in the room, a soft, settled confidence. The kind that comes when a decision has already been made, and the outcome is already certain. Zareth pulled up a wider map. It showed not just Earth, but the entire surrounding sector. The Keth fleet was positioned in a wide arc, a net spread across space, hidden behind the gravitational shadows of dead stars and drifting debris fields. Hundreds of ships, each one more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. "We send the advance fleet first," Zareth continued. "They will disable communications. Then the main force moves in. We offer no warning. There is nothing to negotiate." "Agreed," Vorin said. The hologram of Earth kept spinning, slow, silent, unaware. And then the sensor panel screamed. A sharp, shrill alarm cut through the chamber like a blade. Every figure in the room went still. A young officer ran to the console, his hands moving fast across the controls. "Report," Vorin said sharply. "There is." The officer paused. His fingers moved again. "There is a contact signal. Outer perimeter. Bearing 79, distance 42,000 kilometers." Vorin frowned. "One of ours?" "No." A pause. It's not one of ours." Zareth was already at the console looking at the data herself. She read the readout twice, then a third time. "Origin scan," she said quietly. The system ran the scan. Results came back in seconds. "A human." The words sat on the screen in cold blue letters. Nobody moved for a moment. "One ship?" Vorin asked. "One ship," the officer confirmed. And then something strange happened, something none of them had expected. Because the readings didn't show a ship running, didn't show a ship hiding, didn't show a ship broadcasting a distress signal or turning around in panic. The ship was just there, sitting at the edge of the Keth fleet's outer ring, still, quiet, like it had been there for a while and nobody had noticed. "Warp signature?" Zarath asked. "None detected." "It didn't come through warp?" "No." "It appeared?" "No jump trail. No thermal wake. Nothing." The room went genuinely quiet for the first time that night. Vorin straightened. "Send a warning. Standard protocol. Tell them to retreat or be destroyed." The signal went out. Tight beam. Unmistakable in intent. Seconds passed. No reply. The ship didn't move. It didn't turn. It didn't even shift its angle. It just held position, one small vessel, sitting in the shadow of a fleet that could end it with a single command. "They received the signal?" Vorin asked. "Yes," the officer said. "They received it. And they are not moving. No, Admiral, they are not moving." Zarath stared at the sensor display. Something in her expression changed. Not much, just a small tightening around the eyes, the kind that comes when something does not fit the pattern, when something does not make sense. "Send the warning again," she said. "Last chance." The signal went out a second time. Silence. And then the human ship moved. Not away, not sideways, not in any direction that suggested retreat or evasion. It moved forward, fast, faster than anything that size should move. It rushed straight toward the nearest Keth warship, a destroyer-class vessel carrying a crew of over 400, and before anyone could process what was happening, before anyone could issue a scramble command or charge a defensive system, a beam of energy lanced from the human ship and hit the destroyer at its midpoint. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the destroyer came apart, not slowly, not with a shudder and a fire. It came apart in a single violent flash of light, energy cascading outward in every direction, the ship gone before the shock wave had finished expanding. The war chamber was completely silent. Vorin stared at the screen where the destroyer had been. The space was empty now, clean, like the ship had never existed. "That's not possible," someone whispered. Nobody disagreed. Zarath's voice was flat and precise. "All ships, combat alert, full defensive posture, track that vessel and..." The human ship moved again. It was already targeting its second mark. The second explosion came before the Keth fleet had finished raising its shields.
A frigate.
Gone. The human ship banked hard, cutting through space with a speed that seemed to mock physics. It fired again. A third vessel rocked. Shields holding, but barely. Fires burned along its port side. Emergency venting sent clouds of gas into the void. "Intercept it," Vorin snapped. 3 destroyers now. 3 Keth destroyers peeled out of formation and pushed forward. Energy beams lanced from their weapon banks. The space around the human ship lit up like the inside of a sun. Beams crossed, overlapped, filled the void with lethal light. And the human ship was not there. It had already moved. Not far, but enough. Enough that every beam missed. And in the gap between the Keth ship's fire cycles, it struck again. A precise hit on the lead destroyer's engine section. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to cripple it. The ship slowed, drifting, its weapons falling offline one by one. In the war chamber, something new was spreading through the air. It wasn't panic yet. The Keth didn't panic easily, but it was the beginning of something. A crack in the certainty. A shadow falling over the confidence that had filled that room just minutes ago. "What is it doing?" someone asked quietly. Zarath did not answer right away. She watched the screen. The human ship's movements, the angles of attack, the timing, the way it moved between strikes, not randomly, but deliberately, with purpose. "It's not just attacking," she said slowly. "It's studying us." Vorin turned to look at her. "What?" "Every strike hits a different class of ship. Every angle tests a different part of our formation. It is mapping our response patterns." She paused. "It came here to learn." The room was cold. One ship, Zarath thought. One human ship came into the middle of our fleet, alone, and began picking it apart while simultaneously gathering tactical intelligence on our response times, weapon signatures, and defensive positioning. She had commanded fleets for over 300 years. She had never seen anything like this. "We destroy it," Vorin said. "Full fleet engagement, everything we have." Zarath didn't argue. But in the back of her mind, a single thought settled quietly. What if there are more of them? Inside the human ship, there was no celebration, no cheering, no shouting, no raised fists or triumphant voices. The bridge was quiet, focused. Every console lit with data, every officer bent over their work with the intensity of people who understood exactly how small their margin for error was. At the center of the bridge stood Commander Zara Voss. She was not tall, she was not physically imposing. She had short dark hair and calm gray eyes and the kind of stillness in her face that people spend years trying to achieve. She had been flying combat missions since she was 22. She had been in more tight situations than most officers saw in a lifetime. And right now, standing in the middle of a war chamber the size of a subway car, surrounded by a fleet of alien warships, she looked about as tense as someone waiting for a cup of coffee. Phase 1 complete, her tactical officer said. He was Lieutenant Ren Okoro, young, sharp, the kind of person who processed data faster than most people process sentences. 17 enemy response signatures recorded and logged. Formation patterns mapped. Weapon charge times estimated.
Good, Zara said. How's our hull?
Outer plating took 2 grazing hits. Nothing structural. We're at full capacity. Time to extraction window? 90 seconds. Then let's not waste them. Zara turned to her pilot. Mira, take us to bearing 274. Full burn. The pilot, Mira Chen, small and fast-handed and completely unflappable, punched the controls without a word. The ship surged. The stars outside the viewport blurred with acceleration. Behind them, dozens of alien weapons fired into the space they had just occupied. Zara didn't look back. Send the data package to Central Command, she said. Full uplink. Everything we recorded. Sending now. She nodded once. Outside, the Keth fleet was still firing, energy beams cutting furious lines through the dark. But the human ship was already gone, slipping out through a gap in the formation that only existed because Zara had read the patrol pattern perfectly and predicted exactly when and where it would open. They hit the jump threshold at full speed. 1 second they were there. The next second, space was empty. The Keth fleet was left firing at nothing. In the war chamber, Vorin stood in silence. Zareth looked at the empty sensor display where the human ship had been. They ran, an officer said. Zareth didn't respond to that. She was already thinking about the data package, about what had just been transmitted, about who was receiving it right now, and what they were already planning to do with it. No, she said quietly. They got what they came for. Project Horizon had begun in silence. No press releases, no government announcements, no satellite footage accidentally leaked to the internet. Nothing that could be traced, analyzed, or explained. It had started 14 years ago, deep underground, in a facility so buried beneath rock and steel that the pressure above it could have crushed a building. A small group of people had gathered around a table not very different from the one in the Keth war chamber. Same tension. Same weight in the air. But different eyes, human eyes, tired, determined, frightened, and absolutely certain. They had known something was out there. Not from movies, not from guesses, from data, from decades of quiet observation, from signals intercepted and decoded by systems that officially did not exist. From patterns in cosmic background radiation that didn't match any natural explanation. From probes sent to the edges of the solar system that had returned with sensor readings nobody wanted to publish in a scientific journal. Something was out there, and it was watching. So humanity had made a decision. Not every human, most of the planet had no idea, but the people in that room had made a decision on behalf of everyone, knowing they had no right to make it, knowing they had no choice. They would build, they would train, and when the time came, if the time came, they would not be caught sleeping. The Project Horizon became the largest secret in human history, hidden beneath mountains in 3 different continents, shielded behind layers of classified infrastructure that made black-budget military programs look transparent by comparison. Engineers worked for years on propulsion systems that broke every theoretical limit. Physicists spent entire careers on weapons design. Tacticians and pilots trained in simulation environments so precise they might as well have been the real thing. The ships they built did not look the way ships in movies look. No gleaming chrome, no sweeping curves. They were angular, compact, dense with systems. Built not for beauty but for function. Built to survive. Built to kill if necessary. And built for one specific doctrine. Strike first, don't wait to be hit. Don't wait to be surrounded. Don't wait until the enemy is already inside your system and the situation is already unrecoverable. Hit them before they expect it. Hit them where they don't think you can reach. Hit them so hard, so fast, and so precisely that, by the time they understand what's happening, the tactical situation has already shifted. It was a doctrine born from necessity. Humanity was one planet, one species, with one home. They could not afford a long war. They could not afford to absorb the first blow and then rally. If it came to war, and the data said it would, humanity needed to land the first punch, and that punch needed to count. Commander Zara Voss had been 17 when she was first brought into the program, not because of her scores, though her scores were exceptional, because of something harder to quantify, a quality that the program's psychological evaluators kept writing different words for in their reports: clarity under pressure, absence of hesitation, ability to calculate risk without being paralyzed by it. The word they never used, but all understood, was fearlessness, not the reckless kind, not the kind that gets people killed, the kind that comes from understanding the stakes clearly and deciding to move forward anyway. She had spent 8 years training, 3 years in advanced combat simulations, 2 years as second in command on a deep space patrol vessel, and 1 year quietly alone, planning the mission that had just been completed. She was back on board the Aurora now, Horizon's flagship, reviewing the data her scout ship had transmitted. The tactical picture was coming into focus, clearer than before, sharper. "They're massing," said her second-in-command, Lieutenant Dax Renner. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of steady voice that didn't change whether he was announcing good news or terrible news. He'd been flying with Zara for 4 years. He knew better than to sugarcoat. The outer sensor nets are picking up movement in multiple sectors. Keth fleet mobilization.
Coordinated.
"How many ships?" Zara asked. Dax looked at the screen. "Best estimate right now is 300 plus. Could be more. Some of the larger formations are behind debris fields. Hard to get a clean count." Zara nodded. 300. Against Horizon's total force of 91 vessels, across a front spanning multiple light years. She had expected worse. "They know the scout ship came from somewhere," she said. "They'll try to find the source." "They'll try," Dax agreed. "But they're looking in the wrong places. Our jump signature was masked. The origin point traces back to an empty sector 11 light years from our actual position." "Good. How long before they correct that?" "Their computational mapping would take possibly 60 hours, possibly more." "Then we have 60 hours, Zara said. "Let's not waste any of them." She pulled up the tactical overlay on the main screen. The alien fleet positions, the gaps, the weak points. The supply lines that stretched like long thin threads across the dark.
"Here,"
she said, placing her finger on a point in the display.
"Their logistics hub.
If they're mobilizing 300 ships, they need to be feeding those ships.
Energy.
Ammunition, replacement parts. It all flows through here." She tapped the point again. "We cut this, and their advance slows by days, maybe more." Dax studied the position. "That's deep in their patrol zone." "Yes." "We'd be sending ships into the middle of their formation." "Yes, that's the only option that makes strategic sense," Zara said, not unkindly. "I know, but we're not going to win this by playing defense. We're not going to win this by waiting for them to come to us. They have 300 ships. We have 91. The only way those numbers work in our favor is if we're always choosing the time and place of engagement. That means we keep moving, keep hitting, keep them reacting to us instead of us reacting to them." Dax was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. 60 hours, he said. 60 hours, Zara confirmed. "Get the squadron leaders on comms. We have work to do." The logistics hub was an asteroid, or what had been an asteroid. The Keth had hollowed it out over decades, filling the interior with docking bays, fuel processing units, weapons caches, and communication arrays. From the outside, it looked like a dead rock. From the inside, it was the beating heart of their entire regional operation. It was also, Zara had noted, guarded by exactly 12 ships, 2 destroyers, 8 patrol frigates, and 2 weapons platforms mounted on the asteroid's surface. 12 ships against the 6 she was sending in. On paper, it looked like a massacre, not in humanity's favor. But Zara had not built her plan on paper. She had built it on the data her scout ship had gathered. on the Keth response times, on the weapon charge cycles, on the 3-second gap between a weapon's platform firing and its cooldown sequence that left it completely exposed. On the patrol frigate rotation pattern that created a blind spot in the northern approach every 4 minutes and 17 seconds, 3-second windows, 4-minute gaps. That was what the plan ran on. The 6 human ships dropped out of jump 200 kilometers from the asteroid's surface. No warning signal, no communication attempt. Just 6 ships appearing out of nothing, already moving at full acceleration. The Keth response was fast. Faster than Zara had expected, actually. Weapons platforms lit up within 5 seconds. Patrol frigates broke formation and moved to intercept. But the human ships were already executing the pattern. They split into 2 groups of 3. One group drew fire, weaving, rolling, staying just ahead of the weapons beams, forcing the Keth gunners to track fast and lead their shots. The second group curved wide around the asteroid's axis, coming in from the north at exactly 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the engagement. The blind spot opened. They went through it like water through a crack. The communications array went first, a precise hit that turned 300 meters of Keth infrastructure into a rapidly expanding debris field without touching anything else. Then the primary fuel processing unit, then the weapons cache, though that one required more care. A direct hit on a weapons cache the size of a small building, with enough explosive yield to level a city block, needed to be surgical. Lieutenant Renocoro, flying the lead ship, was surgical. The hit was clean. The cache went up in a controlled sequence. 3 second bow explosions contained, directional, minimizing the shockwave that might have damaged nearby systems and turned the whole asteroid into a threat. The Keth destroyers were moving now, fast, angry, and energy beams cutting wild lines through space as the patrol frigates scrambled to support them. Exit pattern. Zara's voice came over the comm, calm and clear from the Aurora 12,000 kilometers away. Don't engage, don't trade, go. The 6 human ships turned and ran, not in panic, in choreography. 3 ships accelerating along one vector, pulling Keth fire, while the other 3 slipped sideways and disappeared into the debris shadow of a passing comet trail. The destroyers pursued for 40 seconds. Then they stopped, because the human ships were gone. In the silence that followed, the Keth survey teams would eventually calculate the damage. The communications array would take 18 days to rebuild. The fuel processing unit, perhaps 12. The weapons cache could not be rebuilt at all. The materials were simply gone. The entire operation had taken 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Not a single human ship had been lost. What do you think is really happening out there? Do you think humanity was always this prepared, or was this just the beginning of something much bigger? Write in the comments, seriously, I want to know what you think. In the Keth war chamber, the silence was different now. It wasn't the silence of confidence. It wasn't the settled calm of a plan proceeding as expected. It was the silence of something cracking, something fundamental, something that the Keth High Command had never had to face before. Zarath stood at the sensor console. Reports were coming in from across the sector. The logistics hub crippled. A communication relay in Sector 9 destroyed. A fuel depot near the outer perimeter offline, cause unknown, possibly sabotage. A patrol squadron in Sector 14 had simply stopped responding 4 hours ago. She pulled up the timing data. All of it had happened within the same 6-hour window, not randomly, not opportunistically. These were coordinated strikes, planned well in advance, executed simultaneously or in rapid sequence across a front spanning dozens of light years, by a species that, according to every prior assessment, shouldn't have been capable of reaching beyond their own star system. We underestimated them, she said. Vorin was pacing. Something she had never seen him do before. We had no reason to expect. We had every reason, Zarath said, and her voice was quiet but sharp. They have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. Every conflict, every battle, every military engagement. It wasn't waste, it was training. They have been running war games against each other for thousands of years. We looked at that and saw chaos. They were developing doctrine. Vorin stopped pacing. He stared at her. Their technology should not be at this level, he said. Their technology is exactly at this level, Zarath replied, because they didn't develop it publicly. Whatever we were observing on the surface, the political fractures, the resource conflicts, the apparent disunity, that was the surface. Beneath it, they were building something else. She pulled up the sensor data from the scout ship encounter, played it back. The speed, the weapon signature, the jump disappearance with no detectable warp trail. This ship did not come from their primary planet, she said. The jump trajectory, even masked, converges on a sector of space we cataloged as uninhabited. Empty asteroid fields, no hospitable worlds within range. We dismissed it. She paused. They built out there, in the places we weren't watching. Voran sat down slowly. Where is Vel'Krath? He asked. Zarath's expression stayed neutral, but something moved behind her eyes. Vel'Krath was the supreme commander of the Keth war fleet. He had not been part of the initial planning session. He operated on a separate tier above admiral-level command, called in only when a situation escalated beyond normal parameters. This situation had escalated beyond normal parameters. He's been notified, Zarath said. He'll be here within 14 hours, Voran nodded slowly. And in the meantime, Zarath looked at the map, at the positions of human strikes, marked in red, at the gaps in the Keth formation those strikes had created, at the supply lines that were now exposed and vulnerable. In the meantime, she said, we stop moving, we consolidate, we stop letting them choose the terrain. She turned to face Voran directly, because right now we're exactly where they want us, reactive, scattered, trying to defend everywhere at once against an enemy that is moving faster than our decision cycle. Well, Voran was quiet. You're saying we pull back, he said. I'm saying we stop feeding them targets, Zarath said, until Vel'Krath arrives. Until we have a plan that accounts for what they actually are, instead of what we assumed they were. Outside the war chamber's viewport, the stars were cold and still, but somewhere out in the dark, human ships were moving. Aboard the Aurora, the mood was careful, not celebratory, not exhausted, careful. The way a climber feels when they've made it to the halfway point of a vertical face and can see the top and know exactly how much more they still have to do. Zara sat in the briefing room with her senior staff. Dax was on her left, Renner was on her right, a mug of coffee in front of him that had long since gone cold. Navigation officer Yuki Sato had her datapad out and was working through star charts while the conversation happened around her, which was just her way of processing. She always worked while thinking. Keth fleet movement has slowed, Dax said, significantly. In the last 4 hours, patrol activity in our primary zones dropped by 60%. Their outer perimeter ships are pulling inward. They're consolidating, Zara said. That's what it looks like. Which means they've decided we're a real problem, she paused. Which also means they're calling in someone more serious, Dax nodded. Our intelligence estimates suggest Vel'Krath is the logical next step, Supreme Commander. He hasn't been directly involved in a fleet engagement in over 40 years, because nothing has needed him. Until now, Renner said. Until now, Dax agreed. Zara turned to Yuki. What do we know about his doctrine? Yuki set the datapad down. Vel'Krath is old-school Keth, overwhelming force. He doesn't do surgical. He brings everything, hits everything, and accepts collateral damage as the cost of certainty. He's never lost a campaign, she paused. He's also never faced an opponent that fought the way we fight. His historical engagements were all against species that either folded under numerical superiority or tried to match force with force. She glanced at Zara. Neither of which is what we're doing. Right? Zara said. So the question is whether he adapts. He'll adapt? Yuki said flatly. He's not a fool. He'll look at our pattern, identify what we're doing, and try to create conditions that negate it. Specifically, she turned to the star chart. He'll try to force us into a fixed engagement, remove our mobility, take away our ability to choose when and where we fight. And how does he do that? Yuki touched the chart. He creates a choke point. A position so strategically important to us that we have to defend it, whether we want to or not, something we can't let him have. She looked up. He'll try to find out what that is. The room was quiet. Zara stared at the chart. She already knew what Vel'Krath would identify. It was the same thing she would identify if she were in his position. The same thing that made every calculation of human strategy ultimately point back to one location, Earth. Not because Earth was their base of operations. Horizon's fleet infrastructure was deliberately distributed, no single point of failure. But because Earth was what they were fighting for. It was home. It was billions of people who had no yellow band. Since red and green light, when mixed, formatic information to which they came to the bone official is to give a bow with an abnormally wide yellow band. Since red and green light, when mixed, formatic to which they came to the bone official to force us to come to him and fight on his terms. And if we don't go, Dax didn't answer that. He didn't need to. Zara looked around the room. At each face, each person who had signed up for exactly this, knowing exactly what it could cost. We need to hit him before he gets there, she said, before he sets the choke point. Before he gets to dictate the terms, she stood up. We need to find Vel'Krath's fleet and engage on our schedule, not his. We don't know his exact position yet, Renner said. Then we find it. Zara looked at Yuki. Set the deep-range sensors on a continuous sweep. Passive only, no active signals. If a fleet that size is moving, there will be thermal wake, gravitational displacement, something. She turned to Dax. Pull our forward units back to rally point 7. I want everyone within jump range of Earth, just in case. And then? Dax asked. And then, Zara said, we go hunting. Vel'Krath arrived 14 hours after Zerath's call. His ship was unlike any other vessel in the Keth fleet. Where standard warships were large and imposing, Vel'Krath's flagship was vast in a way that felt personal, like an extension of the being inside it. Its hull bore the marks of dozens of campaigns, not damage, but deliberate markings, each one recording a species defeated, a world brought to heel. The records of a conqueror. He walked into the war chamber without ceremony. He was older than Voron by 2 centuries, taller. His amber eyes had deepened to something closer to gold over the decades. When he moved, everything else in the room seemed to slow down slightly, the way the air around a fire always seems to pull toward it. He looked at the sensor display for a long moment without speaking. Then he looked at Zarath. Show me everything, he said. She showed him everything, the scout ship encounter, the logistics hub strike, the relay destruction, the patrol squadron disappearance, the timing analysis, the doctrine assessment, every data point they had collected, every conclusion she had drawn. Vel'Krath listened without interrupting, without reacting. He stood at the console and absorbed the data the way an ocean absorbs rain, quietly, completely, without being changed by any single drop. When it was done, he was silent for a full minute. Where did they come from? He asked. We believe they have a hidden base in an uninhabited sector approximately 11 light-years from. No, Vel'Krath said. Not the ships, the doctrine, the willingness to strike first, the tactical patience. He turned to look at Zarath directly. Where did they learn this? Zarath blinked. It was not the question she had expected. From each other, she said carefully. Their history of internal conflict. Their history of internal conflict is the training ground, Vel'Krath said. I understand that, but the doctrine, the specific shape of what they're doing, this is not primitive instinct, this is a philosophy. Someone designed this. He turned back to the display. And I want to know who. Zarath had no answer to that. Vel'Krath studied the map, the patterns of human strikes, the way they moved, the logic underneath the motion. They want us reactive, he said. They want us defending everywhere so they can attack anywhere. They are managing our attention. He traced a line on the display. If I were commanding this force, this size, against an enemy this large, I would be doing exactly what they are doing, up to a point. He stopped his finger. And then I would do this. He drew a circle around a sector of space, the sector containing Earth. They will want to bait us, he said. Force us away from the planet. Keep us chasing shadows while they decide when to stop running. He turned to face Zirith and Vorin both. So we do not chase, we go to the thing they cannot sacrifice, and we wait. Zirith felt something cold settle in her chest. Earth, she said. Earth, Vel'Krath confirmed. We move the entire fleet. We do not sneak. We do not hide. We go in full force, in plain sight, and we sit above their planet, and we tell them come to us, or we end this your way. Vorin exhaled slowly. And if they don't come? Vel'Krath's golden eyes were calm and absolute. Then we demonstrate that we are serious, he said. And they will come. The alert reached Zara on the Aurora's bridge at 0340 ship time. Yuki's voice was controlled but not entirely. Commander, deep passive scan has a result. Thermal wake, gravitational displacement consistent with a fleet formation of approximately, she paused, checked the reading again. Approximately 460 vessels. Zara was out of her bunk and on the bridge in 90 seconds. She looked at the data. 460 ships, moving in a consolidated formation, not trying to hide, not dispersed, together, in a direct bearing. She ran the projection forward. The bearing pointed directly at Earth. How long? She said. At their current acceleration, 31 hours until they reach optimal engagement range of the planet. 31 hours. Zara looked at the tactical display, her fleet, 91 ships, scattered across multiple sectors, some fresh from operations, some needing resupply. She had told Dax to pull them to rally point 7, within jump range of Earth. They were mostly there, 460 against 91. She stood at the main console and ran the math. Not the simple math, not the impossible-looking ratio that made her fleet look like a single candle against a forest fire. The real math. The math of speed and positioning and timing. The math of what her ships could do that those 460 could not anticipate. Because Vel'Krath, and she was certain this was Vel'Krath, this was exactly the kind of move she had been warned about, was betting that she would do what every other species had done. Come to him. Fight his battle on his terms. Let the numbers decide. He was betting that Earth would make her predictable. He was right that Earth made the stakes absolute. He was wrong about what she would do with that. All units, Zara said into the open channel. Her voice was clear and steady. This is Commander Voss. Oh, I need everyone at rally point 7 in 6 hours. Full readiness. We are going to meet the Keth fleet before it reaches Earth. Not at Earth. Before. She paused for exactly 1 second. We choose the battlefield, not them, always. Dax looked at her from across the bridge. 460 ships, Zara, he said quietly. She nodded. I know, she said. And they'll be in formation, moving together, expecting us to meet them head-on or to run. She pulled up the star chart and pointed to a region of space between the Keth fleet's current position and Earth. A dense field of dormant stars, brown dwarfs, massive gravitational wells that created unpredictable sensor interference in a corridor about 3 light-years wide. We'll meet them here, in the corridor. Their formation will compress, their sensors will be degraded, and we'll be waiting. Dax studied the chart. An ambush, he said. A decisive engagement, Zara said. On ground of our choosing. She looked at the stars beyond the viewport. 31 hours. Get some sleep, she said to the bridge crew. All of you. 4 hours. Then we work. The corridor was called the Harrow Belt on no official map, because it appeared on no official map. It was a dead zone, a 3 light-year stretch of gravitational turbulence created by the competing pulls of 6 brown dwarf stars clustered close enough together to make sensor systems behave strangely. Jump travel through it was unpredictable. Long-range communication was degraded. And any large fleet trying to maintain tight formation while passing through would find its ships being nudged, pulled, separated by forces too subtle to fight with thrusters, but too persistent to ignore. Zara had found it 4 years ago during a survey mission. She had filed the data away.
Quietly.
The way you file away something you know you'll need someday. The human fleet arrived first, 91 ships, slipping into the Harrow Belt one by one, each taking a specific position Zara had pre-calculated to avoid the worst gravitational interference while keeping sensor coverage across the entire corridor. Engines cut, passive systems only. No emissions that a distant Keth scanner might pick up. They waited. 4 hours. The Keth fleet came through on schedule, and the first thing that happened, before a single weapon was fired, before any command was given, was that the Keth formation began to drift. Not dramatically, not in a way that looked dangerous from inside the fleet. But from Zara's position, watching the passive sensor feed, she could see it clearly. The outer wings spreading slightly, the vanguard pulling ahead of the main body, the support vessels falling behind as their navigation systems struggled with the competing gravitational signals. 460 ships were becoming 3 separate groups. Zara watched for 60 seconds, confirming the pattern, making sure it wasn't random noise. It wasn't. Forward squadrons, she said quietly into the comm. You have your targets. Hit the vanguard first, fast and complete. Then pull back into the belt before the main body can respond. 30 human ships moved out of the shadows. They hit the Keth vanguard, approximately 80 vessels that had pulled ahead of the main fleet, from 3 directions simultaneously. The Harrow Belt's sensor interference meant the vanguard ships couldn't clearly read where the fire was coming from. Beams and missiles converged from angles that seemed to shift, reflections and ghost signals creating the illusion of an enemy everywhere at once. Keth ships fired back. They were good. They were experienced. But they were firing blind in a room with too many echoes, and every third shot missed clean. Human ships moved continuously, never stopping, never presenting a static target. They wove between the gravitational pulls of the brown dwarfs with a familiarity that came from hours of simulation training specifically designed for this belt. 11 Keth ships in the vanguard went dark in the first 4 minutes. Then the 30 human ships melted back into the belt. The Keth main body arrived to find their vanguard damaged and scattered, their formation disrupted, their sensors showing a dozen different possible enemy positions simultaneously. Vel'Krath's voice on the Keth command channel was measured. Reform. Hold position. Do not pursue into the interference field. Smart, Zara thought. He was smart enough not to chase, but she had anticipated that too. She activated the second phase. 40 human ships came from the opposite direction, from deep inside the belt, emerging briefly on the Keth fleet's flank, striking the supply section at the rear, then pulling back. It was a mirror of the first attack. Fast, precise. Gone before the Keth could fully respond, the Keth fleet turned to face the new threat, which meant their attention was now split in 2 directions. Zara moved with the remaining 21 ships. They didn't weave. They didn't dart. They moved in a straight line, directly at the Keth fleet's center, shields up and weapons charged, and they closed the distance at maximum speed. The Keth had not expected a direct charge. Nobody charged into a fleet 5 times their size. Nobody except humans who had spent 3 seconds calculating that the Keth's divided attention created a 12-second window in which the central formation's weapon coverage had 2 blind spots that overlapped for exactly long enough. 12 seconds was all Zara needed. The Aurora's weapons fired. Not scattered, not random, targeted with information from every passive sensor the belt had fed them over 4 hours of silent observation. Keth weapon platforms, command nodes, communication relays, the nervous system of the fleet. In 12 seconds, 7 critical Keth command ships were disabled. Then the Aurora banked hard and pulled back into the belt. Behind her, the Keth fleet was paid to be, for the first time, genuinely confused. Not panicked, not broken, but uncertain. Uncertain of where the enemy was, uncertain of which direction to defend, uncertain of what the next attack would look like or where it would come from. On Vel'Krath's bridge, a status report was delivered in a quiet voice by his tactical officer. 17 ships disabled. Communication relays at 60%. Formation coherence disrupted. Enemy position unknown. Vel'Krath looked at the sensor display. He had been in hundreds of engagements. He had never felt this particular sensation before. Not fear, not confusion, respect. They have been planning this specific engagement, he said slowly. They chose this battlefield, they studied it, they knew exactly how our formation would respond to the gravitational interference. He was quiet for a moment. They prepared for this fight before we knew there was going to be a fight. His tactical officer waited. They are always 3 moves ahead, Vel'Krath said. Not with frustration, with something closer to recognition, because they are afraid, and they have channeled that fear into preparation instead of surrender. He turned to the display. That is what makes them dangerous, not their weapons, not their speed. He paused. Their preparation. He issued a new command, not to attack, to retreat. The Keth fleet pulled back from the Harrow Belt, not in rout, not in panic, deliberately. It was Vel'Krath ordering a controlled withdrawal, preserving his fleet's coherence, refusing to feed it into a killing ground that someone else had chosen. Human ships watched them go from within the belt's shadows. Nobody cheered. Renner exhaled slowly. They're pulling out? Yes, Zara said. We did it. We won this engagement, Zara said. Not the war. She looked at the sensor display. The retreating Keth fleet. Still 411 ships, 49 lost or disabled in the encounter. Still enormous. Still more than capable of returning in force. What are they going to do now? Dax asked. Zara thought about Vel'Krath. About the kind of commander who commanded that way. Who adapted mid-engagement. Who retreated when a fight wasn't going his way rather than pushing stubbornly forward. He's going to think, she said.
He's going to go back and look at everything that just happened and figure out what he missed.
She paused. And then he's going to try to use it against us.
Dax nodded.
So we don't give him time. We don't give him time, Zara agreed. She pulled up the star chart. Beyond the Harrow Belt, beyond the retreating Keth fleet, deeper in toward the core of Keth-controlled space, there were more fleets, more resources, more power than humanity could ever match in a direct exchange. But there were also pressure points, places where the Keth Empire held itself together, critical infrastructure, political nodes, supply systems that fed not just this fleet but the entire regional network, systems that had never been hit because no enemy had ever gotten close enough. No enemy had been able to, until now. There's a way to end this without destroying their fleet, Zara said slowly. The thought had been forming for days, but only now was it taking final shape. Not by winning every battle, not by attrition. She touched the chart. Here, the Keth Conclave, their governing council. If we can reach it, not to harm it, but to demonstrate that we can reach it, it changes the negotiation entirely. You want to make them negotiate? Renner said, surprised. I want to make them realize that a war with humanity is not a cost-effective enterprise, Zara said. Every civilization in the galaxy is watching this right now. Every empire is taking notes. If we can make the Keth decide that the cost of conquering Earth is higher than the value of the prize. They leave us alone, Dax finished. They leave us alone, Zara confirmed. Not because we beat them. Because we made them understand that winning against us costs too much. She looked at the chart for a long moment. But first, she said, we need to survive what comes next, because Vel'Krath isn't done. Not by a long way. What do you think Vel'Krath is going to do next? Do you think humanity can actually force an empire like the Keth to back down? Or is something even bigger coming? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your theory. Vel'Krath did not sleep. He stood at the observation window of his flagship and watched the stars. In his centuries of command, he had stood at this window after victories and after defeats, and after the dozens of ambiguous outcomes that fell between those extremes. He had always known, in those moments, what to do next. The path had always been clear. You pressed an advantage. You corrected a failure. You mobilized more force. But tonight, standing at the window with the Harrow Belt far behind him and the data from the engagement still running through his mind, he was not thinking about military strategy. He was thinking about a question Zareth had not been able to answer. Where did they learn this? Not the tactics, not the hardware. Those could be explained. But the willingness, the ability to look at an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds and decide to hit it first, to look at a fleet 5 times your size and calculate how to win anyway, to design a battle years before the battle happened. That kind of thing didn't come from technology, it didn't come from strategy manuals. It came from something that couldn't be measured. Vel'Krath had spent his life leading a civilization that had never been seriously challenged. The Keth were strong because they had always been strong. Because strength accumulated over centuries, because power reinforced itself, because the species they faced were either weaker or wise enough to yield before the price of defiance became too high. Humanity had not done the calculus that every other species had done, and he needed to understand why. Zarath entered the observation room quietly. She had been running her own analysis for the past several hours, and her expression told him she had found something. "The signal we intercepted," she said, without preamble. "The one that transmitted from the scout ship back to their command structure after the initial encounter. We have partially decoded it." Vel'Krath turned from the window. "It was not a data package," Zarath said. "Or not primarily. There was tactical data, yes. But the majority of the transmission was something we did not initially recognize as significant." She paused. "It was morale communication, personal messages from the crew of the scout ship, to their families, to their homes." Vel'Krath was still. "They went on that mission knowing they might not come back," Zarath continued. "And before they went, they sent messages home. The tactical data was almost secondary." She looked at the datapad in her hand. "The final message in the transmission from the pilot was to someone called her daughter. It was 22 seconds long. The content is personal, and I won't restate it, but it ended with," she paused again, "it ended with, 'I'm not afraid, I promise.'" The observation room was very quiet. Vel'Krath looked at Zarath. "Not afraid," he said. "Not afraid," she confirmed. He turned back to the window. The stars were unchanged. It's cold and distant and absolute, the way they had been for his entire life. "That is what we cannot match," he said softly. "That is what no weapon can counter and no fleet can overwhelm." He was quiet for a moment. "They fight for something specific, not an empire, not territory, not abstract dominance. They fight for those 22-second messages, for the people waiting on the other end of them." Zarath said nothing. "And that," Vel'Krath said, "is why they strike first, because to them the cost of not striking is unbearable. The cost of waiting to be hit, of letting someone else decide the terms, of accepting the role of the weak and the conquered, to them that is worse than any battle." He paused. "They would rather die fighting than survive surrendering." He turned from the window. "Call a full council," he said. "All fleet commanders. I want everyone present." Zarath blinked. "To plan the next offensive? No," Vel'Krath said. "To discuss something we have not discussed seriously in 3 centuries. He moved toward the door. "Whether this war should be fought at all. On the Aurora, Zara received 2 pieces of information within the same hour. The first was from Yuki's sensor array. The Keth fleet had stopped, not pulling back further, not reforming for another advance, simply stopped in a holding position at the edge of Keth-controlled space, engines at minimum power. No attack posture, no advanced trajectory, waiting. The second bow falls upon the green of the first. The result is to give a bow with an abnormally wide yellow band. Since red and green light, when mixed, form mixed, form mixed, form mixed at mind. Since red and green light, when mixed, form mixed, form mixed, form mixed, form in a language that the Aurora's translation matrix identified as a diplomatic encoding protocol used by the Keth in interspecies communication, a protocol used not in warfare but in the opening of formal contact. It said, "We wish to speak." Zara stared at the message for a long time. Dax read it over her shoulder. "Is this a trap?" "It could be," she said. "They know where we are. If they wanted to destroy us, they'd have hit us with something while we were reading this, yes?" Zara set the message down. "They want to talk. After everything that just happened. Because of everything that just happened," she said. "We hurt them, not catastrophically. They have plenty of fleet left, but we hurt them enough, and in a specific enough way, that continuing this war now means accepting that every engagement from here forward is going to cost more than they planned for." She looked at the message again. "Vel'Krath is calculating whether the cost of Earth is worth the price of taking it." "And our answer?" Zara thought for a moment. Our answer is that we're willing to talk, she said, but on our terms, in a location of our choosing, with our fleet in position to respond if they decide talking is a preamble to something else. She looked at Dax. And with everything we have ready to go, because they might be sincere, or they might be buying time for a second fleet to get into position, she paused. We'd be ready for both, Dax nodded slowly. You think Vel'Krath is sincere? Zara thought about the kind of commander who retreated instead of pushing into a costly fight. Who took data seriously, who adapted. I think he's the kind of person who can change his assessment when the evidence changes, she said. Whether that makes him sincere about talking or sincerely dangerous is what we're going to find out. She began drafting the reply. The location she chose was a neutral sector, empty space, no strategic value to either side, accessible to both. She gave a time, 54 hours from now, which gave her long enough to reposition her fleet and gave the Keth no obvious advantage in the setup. She ended the message with 3 words that she had chosen carefully, that she wanted to be perfectly clear to whoever received them. We are ready. The meeting took place in a small shuttle. Zara had insisted on that. Not a station, not a large vessel. A shuttle so that the number of people present was limited and the environment was controlled. 6 humans on one side, 6 Keth on the other, in a room small enough that everyone could see everyone else clearly without any screens or projections between them. Vel'Krath was taller in person than the sensor data had suggested. He had to duck slightly when he entered the shuttle. His golden eyes moved across the human delegation with an attention that was evaluative but not hostile. Like a doctor taking vitals. He sat. Zara sat across from him. For a moment, neither side spoke. Then Vel'Krath said, I reviewed the transmission your pilot sent before the first engagement. Zara did not react visibly. She had wondered if they'd managed to decode it. She said she was not afraid, Vel'Krath continued. Was that true? Zara considered the question. Then said for her, Yes, I think so. She paused. The rest of us manage. Something shifted in Vel'Krath's expression. Not quite a smile. She wasn't sure his face worked that way, but something. I have commanded forces for 312 years, he said. I have never encountered a species that fights the way your people fight, not with weapons. With weapons you are impressive, but not exceptional. With will. He placed his 4-fingered hands on the table. I came to this meeting because I believe that continuing this war will cost both of us more than it is worth. And I believe you have already concluded the same. Zara held his gaze. What are you proposing? A recognition? Vel'Krath said. Formal. Binding under Keth law and whatever corollary framework your civilization chooses. A recognition that humanity is a sovereign power. That your systems are your systems. That the Keth Empire will extend no claim over your territory, resources, or people. He paused. In exchange for a mutual cessation of hostilities. The shuttle was quiet. Dax, on Zara's left, was very still. Zara said, And the other species watching this? Because you are not the only empire that looked at Earth and saw an opportunity. Vel'Krath said nothing for a moment. If the Keth Empire recognizes humanity as a sovereign power, he said slowly, that recognition carries weight. Any empire that moves against you after that point is making a statement about their relationship with the Keth as well. He met her eyes. It is not a guarantee, but it is a substantial deterrent. Why would you do that? Zara asked. What does the Keth Empire gain? What we gain, Vel'Krath said, is the understanding that a war with humanity is a war without a clean end. You will not surrender. You will not yield. Every engagement will cost us ships, resources, time, and political capital we would rather spend elsewhere. He looked at her steadily. And we gained the acknowledgement that we were willing to recognize reality when it changed. That we are not so proud that we cannot adapt. He paused. That is its own kind of strength. Zara looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the project, about the 14 years, about every person who had given their lives or their time or their decades to building this capability because they believed humanity deserved to survive on its own terms, not protected by someone else, not permitted to exist by a more powerful neighbor, existing because it had earned its place. She thought about the pilot's message. "I'm not afraid, I promise. I need to communicate this to my government," she said. "I can't bind humanity to anything unilaterally." "I know," Vel'Krath said. "And there will be conditions, verification protocols, specific territorial definitions, a process for disputes, of course. And if any Keth vessel approaches human space without prior communication and permission, I understand," Vel'Krath said. "You will strike first." Zara nodded once. "Yes," she said. "We will." Vel'Krath looked at her. And then he did something she had not expected. He inclined his head. A small movement. But deliberate, not submission, acknowledgement. Zara inclined her head in return. The formal agreement took 11 days to draft, verify, and sign. It was done on a neutral station in the empty sector, with representatives from both species present and a dozen other species watching from monitoring positions they thought were undetected. They were not undetected. Zara knew they were there. She had counted on it. Because this was not just a message to the Keth. This was a message to everyone watching. Humanity had fought. Humanity had absorbed the threat of overwhelming force and responded not with despair but with strategy, precision, and an absolute refusal to accept the role being assigned to them. They had turned a near-extinction scenario into a negotiated recognition of sovereignty, not because they were the strongest, because they had refused to act like the weakest. Back on Earth, the news was released slowly, carefully, in stages. The public did not know everything. There were details that would take years to become public, decisions that would be argued over by historians for centuries. But the core of it was shared. Humanity was not alone in the galaxy. Where humanity had been tested, and humanity had passed. On the Aurora, Zara stood at the viewport and watched Earth below, blue and green and wrapped in thin clouds, the same as it had ever been, unscathed, still there. Dax stood beside her. "Do you think it's over?" he asked. "The Keth chapter?" Zara said. "Maybe. Vel'Krath is good for his word, I think. He respects the agreement because he respects what it cost to get here." She paused. "But the galaxy is very large, and there are species out there that we haven't seen yet. Species that are watching this right now and drawing their own conclusions. Some of them will be encouraged by the agreement," Dax said. "A path to coexistence." "Yes," Zara said. "And some of them will be threatened by it. A species that refused to be conquered, that fought on its own terms and won recognition by force of will. That's a different kind of threat to some empires, the kind that gives other subjugated species ideas."
Dax was quiet.
"So what do we do?" he asked. Zara watched a slow line of sunlight move across the ocean far below. "We keep building," she said. "We keep training. We stay ready." She paused. "And we make sure that anyone out there who is thinking about what we did and deciding whether to try the same thing against us, we make sure they see clearly that we are still here, still watching, still ready to be exactly what we are." "What are we?" Dax asked. She turned from the viewport. "We are humanity," she said simply. "And we strike first." In the deep dark at the far edge of the galaxy, in a ship that appeared on no sensor array and cast no shadow detectable by any known instrument, two figures watched a recording. The recording was of the battle in the Harrow Belt. The engagement had been perfect in its execution. Not perfect as in flawless. There had been losses, close calls, moments of genuine danger. Perfect in the sense of being exactly, precisely what the situation required. No more and no less. One of the figures spoke. The Keth recognized them, it said. "Yes," the other replied. A formal recognition, binding, historic. A pause. In 300 years of Keth expansion, they have never done this. No. The recording continued. The Aurora banking through the belt. The coordinated attack patterns. The controlled withdrawal after the objective was achieved. "They are not like the others," the first figure said. "No," the second agreed. "They could have fought the Keth to exhaustion, spent years in attrition. One eventually, possibly, at enormous cost, a pause. Instead, they found the point of maximum leverage and applied precisely enough force to shift the balance, then offered terms. The first figure turned from the recording. "We have been watching this sector for 400 years, it said. We have seen 42 species emerge to spaceflight capability. Of those, 31 were absorbed by existing empires, 7 destroyed themselves. 3 reached a kind of equilibrium, limited, contained, not significant on any larger scale. And the humans," the second figure said. "And the humans," the first agreed. A long silence. "The question before us," the first figure said, "is no longer whether they are significant. They are. The question is what they become, and whether we should make contact." Yes. The recording ended. The screen went dark. "They will be surprised," the second figure said. "They think they are still new to this. They think the galaxy is only beginning to notice them." "They are not wrong," the first said. "They are new. They are noticed. But they have done something in this short time that most species never do at all." A pause. "They refused to be defined by someone else's expectations. They looked at the situation and decided what it meant, rather than accepting the meaning they were handed." A long silence. The stars outside the viewport were cold and vast and ancient. "Contact," the first figure said finally. "Are you certain?" "No," the first figure replied. "But uncertainty is where interesting things happen." A pause. "And I think, for the first time in a very long while, I want to see what happens next." On Earth, the night was quiet. In a small house on the edge of a city, a woman stood at an open window. The sky above her was clear, the stars were bright. She had no idea that somewhere among them, an agreement had just been signed that would change the trajectory of her species forever. She was just watching the stars the way people had always watched them, with a feeling she couldn't quite name, something between wonder and longing, something that pulled at a part of her that didn't have a word for it. Her daughter appeared beside her, 7 years old, sleepy. "Why? Do you always look at the stars?" the girl asked. The woman thought about it. "Because they're ours," she said finally. The girl looked up. The stars looked back. "All of them?" the girl asked. The woman smiled. "We're working on it," she said. Above them, undetected, unseen, beyond the reach of any instrument humanity yet possessed, a ship turned slowly in the dark and began to move toward them, not with threat, with curiosity, because after everything that had happened, after the first strike, the battles, the negotiations, the agreement, the watching and the calculating, and the centuries of waiting, one truth had become clear to every being with the wisdom to see it. Humanity was just getting started. And the galaxy, whether it was ready or not, was going to find out what that meant.